swear this math is so easy, but explaining it is like harder than the math is. Like it makes sense, but when you have to explain it, it's like going back to 3rd grade or something.
Ask Alec.
Hey guys, it's Alec Torelli and welcome to an episode of Ask Alec, where I take your questions and answer them in quick, short videos here for you today. I'm bringing you this one from Tuscany in the region of Montalcino, where they make some of the best Brunello wine in the world. Right behind me is our paradise for the weekend. It is Castello Banfi. It's over 2,700 acres of property where they make some of the best wine I've ever tried. Also their own homemade olive oil and vinegar products as well. Absolutely incredible. If you are in Tuscany, I highly recommend you check it out and encourage you to check out my blog as well, alectorelli.com. I have a lot more information about Tuscany and this place and the magic behind it as well. But today, I know you guys have questions about poker, and today's question comes from Raul. He says, can you please explain a little bit more about implied odds and how you use them? How different is it to pot odds? He's especially curious if there's a different way to use implied odds in tournaments versus cash games. Raul, great question. I think it's super important to understand this difference, and I'm happy to clarify that for you here today. So first, what are pot odds? Pot odds are simply the ratio of the size of the pot to the amount that you have to call. So for example, if the pot is $100 and the bet is $50, then your pot odds are 100 to 50 or 2 to 1. A lot of times it's easier to think about pot odds in terms of a percentage rather than a ratio, and that's because the percentage directly correlates to equity. So if you think about how much equity you have in a certain hand, what's the percentage that you're gonna make your draw, or what percentage you have to win the hand, it's easy to compare apples to apples and say, okay, this is the percent I have to win the hand, what percent odds am I getting in order to justify calling? So in order to convert your pot odds to a percentage, to figure out what percent equity you need to justify calling, you simply add the size of the pot plus the amount you have to call, and then divide that by the amount you have to call. So in this case, you would say, okay, what percent do I need to have? The pot's 100, my bet size is 50. You take 100 plus 50 is 150, and then you say my amount I have to call is $50. So 50 divided by 150 is 33%. And you know right there, you need 33% equity to justify calling. That's if you have pot odds. So if you consider that it's a possibility that you win more money if you call this current bet, that's what implied odds are. So let's say you're calling this same $50 bet, but you don't have 33% equity to win the hand. Maybe you have a gut shot straight draw, for example, which doesn't have 33% equity on the flop. It's much less than that. But you could still justify calling if you expect to win the difference in the equity you have versus the pot odds you're getting on a later street. Generally, if you expect to win one bet or more in No Limit Hold'em, you have implied odds to call. That's a general rule, and that's simply because the pot size grows exponentially, and so any bet on a later street like the turn or the river is going to be so much bigger than the bet size on the flop, and that bigger bet size will give you the implied odds back that you need to justify calling with a weak draw. So generally a good thing to keep in mind, a simple rule of thumb for an amateur player is if you're gonna win one more bet, or especially two more bets, then you have the implied odds you need to justify calling with a given draw. Now, as implied odds grow in importance, reverse implied odds grow in danger. So you really want to be even more cautious as the stacks get deeper about playing hands that have reverse implied odds. Hands like King Jack offsuit become catastrophic when you're 200 big blinds deep, because the amount of money you stand to lose if you flop a big hand is dramatically bigger than if you have, let's say, 30 big blinds, where if you flop your top pair, you're more confident getting the money in because the stack size is so much smaller. So when you're playing cash games with very, very deep stacks, it's really important to have hands that could flop nutted hands, hands that you're confident to get all the money in with. So hands like nut flush draws with ace-x of spades or ace-x suited are so much better than king-x suited or queen-x suited, because when you have the nut flush draw, you can stack the other people that play the king high flush draw or the queen high flush draw. The same is true with pocket pairs. Pocket players have great implied odds, but as the stacks get deeper, small pocket pairs actually sometimes have reverse implied odds, because when you're 300 big blinds deep playing 2 3s and the flop comes 9-7-3, you're really in a sticky spot. You don't really want to put 300 big blinds in a pot with bottom set because you might be up against a bigger set. So to get the best use out of implied odds as the stacks get deeper, think about playing hands that could flop the nuts, that could dominate other opponents. That's big flush draws, big Broadway draws, and big pairs that could flop sets over smaller pairs. Another benefit to the deep stack nature of poker, whether it's in cash games or tournaments, is in addition to having implied odds, you have the opportunity to win the pot later by representing a hand. Sometimes when you call a bet on the flop or the turn, it gives you creative opportunity to win the pot when you don't make your hand. For more about these advanced concepts, I talk about this a lot in my book, The 4 Steps to Beating Anyone at Poker, which I highly recommend you check out on my website. That's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Love in Tuscany, and if you guys have more questions of your own you'd like me to answer, feel free to shoot them over to me and I'll pick the best ones and select them right here for future videos. That's all for now. Ciao from Toscana. See you guys next time.